Close your eyes and imagine the dawn of civilization. A time when the first cities emerged from the fertile soil of Mesopotamia, when humanity began to write, to build, and to wonder. Among the ruins of this ancient world, archaeologists uncovered clay tablets, fragile yet eternal, carved with strange symbols and stories that refuse to be forgotten. Stories that speak of the Anunnaki. But who were they? The tablets describe them as powerful beings who descended from the heavens, bringing with them knowledge, technology, and wisdom far beyond the reach of ordinary mortals. Were they simply gods of mythology, created to explain the mysteries of existence? Or could they have been something else entirely, visitors, not of this earth? The Sumerians, credited with inventing writing, building ziggurats, and mapping the stars, left us more than just the tools of civilization. They left us questions. Why did they describe these sky beings with such reverence? Why did their stories echo with detail that feels less like legend and more like memory? Some scholars argue that the Anunnaki were nothing more than symbols, a reflection of human imagination. Yet others whisper of a darker, stranger possibility, that these gods were extraterrestrial beings whose arrival sparked humanity's first great leap forward. The line between myth and history blurs. And as we trace the symbols carved in clay thousands of years ago, one haunting question emerges. Were the gods of ancient myth truly gods? Or were they travelers from beyond the stars? This is Sumer, a place that existed more than 2,000 years before the Roman Empire was even a glimmer in a wolf's eye. This is where it all began. You walk towards the open gates, your feet silent on the dusty path. The air changes as you enter the city proper. The clean scent of the river gives way to the smells of life. Baking bread from a communal oven. The sharp tang of livestock in their pens. The sweet, heavy perfume of incense drifting from a high place you can't yet see. The streets are narrow, a tangled web designed for feet and carts, not cars. Houses are packed together, their flat roofs providing an extra living space for sleeping on hot nights like this one. It's also strange yet so profoundly familiar. This is the blueprint for every city that would ever follow. It's a mainstream historical fact that southern Mesopotamia, particularly Sumer, is where the first complex urban centers were established. A revolutionary step for humanity, but standing here in the quiet dark, it doesn't feel like a fact in a textbook. It feels like a secret you've just been let in on. You notice the dark lines of mortar between the pale bricks of a particularly large building. It's bitumen, naturally occurring asphalt. This sticky black substance was their superglue, their waterproof sealant, their everything construction material. They used it to coal their reed boats and bind their city walls, a quirky but incredibly effective bit of ancient technology that allowed them to build bigger and stronger than ever before. It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about their ingenuity. They weren't just surviving here, they were innovating, thriving. And then you see it towering over the entire city, a dark shape silhouetted against the sea of stars is the ziggurat. It's a colossal step pyramid, a man-made mountain of clay bricks rising in terraces toward the heavens. It seems to pull the entire city into its orbit, a center of gravity for both the physical and the spiritual world. You feel an instinctual urge to walk towards it. A pull that the thousands of people sleeping around you must have felt every single day. As you get closer, you see the immense stairways climbing its face, each step worn smooth by a million forgotten footsteps. Priests, scribes, maybe even kings all climbed these stairs, their eyes fixed on the shrine that would have crowned the summit. This is where the shadow of the Anunnaki lies heaviest. For the Sumerians, this ziggurat wasn't just an impressive piece of architecture, something to put on a postcard if postcards had existed. It was a ladder, a connection point between their world, the world of mortals, and the world of the gods above. Archaeologists still debate the precise function of these massive structures. Were they simply temples, symbolic mountains to bring the priests closer to the divine? Or were they also administrative hubs, granaries, and astronomical observatories, the true centers of the city-state's power? The shrine at the top was considered the earthly home of the city's patron god, a place where the divine could literally descend and dwell among them. And in Sumer, the divine had a name, the Anunnaki. You stand at the base, craning your neck back to see the highest terrace. You can almost imagine the priests clad in white linen, performing their rituals in the moonlight, their chants echoing down into the sleeping streets. They were tending to the needs of a god or gods who were believed to be very real, very demanding, and very powerful. These weren't abstract concepts of divinity. The Anunnaki were beings with personalities, with rivalries, with needs, and they demanded these structures be built. Imagine the sheer effort, the decades of labor, thousands of people toiling under the brutal sun to build this staircase for a god who might or might not decide to use it. It's a level of devotion that's hard to comprehend. Almost as if they weren't just trying to please their gods, but also to pay off some cosmic debt. The Anunnaki shadow isn't a literal one cast by the ziggurats mass. It's a weight on the soul of the city, a constant awareness that a higher inscrutable power is watching from above, from that starlit penthouse at the top of the world. You're still standing there at the foot of that colossal structure, lost in the immensity of it all. The cool night air wraps around you as you contemplate the sheer faith required to build such a thing. But as you stare up at the darkened steps, a new question begins to form in your mind. A question that shifts your focus from the what to the who. Who exactly were they building this for? You turn from the ziggurat and drift through the silent labyrinth of streets, letting your curiosity guide you. You find yourself drawn to a large, quiet building, its doorway open to the night. Inside, the air smells of dry clay and old knowledge. This is a house of tablets, a library or a school for scribes where the city's records and stories are kept. Shelves of baked clay tablets line the walls, each one covered in the tiny wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform script. You pick one up, it's cool and heavy in your hands. On its surface is a story, and as you trace the symbols, the myth comes alive in your imagination. You witness the arrival. The texts don't speak of a gentle, ethereal materialization. They speak of a descent. The Anunnaki came from the heavens. Imagine the scene the Sumerians described. Not just one being, but a group arriving on Earth after a journey through the celestial ocean. The descriptions are, of course, poetic. They speak of brilliance, of power, of a presence that must have been terrifying and awe-inspiring to early humans. But as you stand here in this silent library, the modern part of your brain can't help but superimpose new images onto these ancient words. When they wrote from the heavens, did they simply mean the conceptual realm of the gods, or did they mean the literal sky? This is the question that hums beneath all of these stories. Were these beings gods in the way we might think of Zeus or Odin? Powerful metaphysical entities born from belief and personifying the forces of nature, or were they visitors, physical beings stepping out of something? The Sumerians didn't have a word for alien or spacecraft. So what words would they have used? They might have said a shining chariot or a celestial boat. They call the beings themselves Ding, a word whose symbol is a star and which is translated as gods, or more literally the shining ones. A beautiful poetic term that just happens to leave the door wide open for interpretation. Scholars continue to argue whether the phrase from the heavens was meant as a literal point of origin or simply a metaphor for their supreme status. The way we might say a king has heavenly authority. The mainstream historical view is clear. The Anunnaki are the principal deities of the Sumerian pantheon. Their name, in fact, is generally translated to mean something like princely offspring, or those of royal blood, signifying their place as the children of the chief sky god Anu. They were simply the top tier of divinity in a complex religious system. But as you run your thumb over the hard clay, that explanation feels a little too neat, a little too simple. It doesn't quite capture the feeling these texts give off. They describe beings who came here, who did things, who had a plan. You wander over to another set of records. Not flat tablets, but small cylindrical stones covered in intricate carvings. These are cylinder seals. When rolled across wet clay, they leave an impression, acting as a signature or a way to mark property. Most show typical scenes, a king before a god, animals, religious symbols. But then you see a replica of a particularly famous one that has caused no end of debate. It's known to us as VA 243. It shows several seated figures, but what's next to them is what captures your attention. It's a depiction of a star surrounded by several orbs. To a mainstream archaeologist, it's obviously the sun or another star surrounded by other stars or religious symbols. But to someone looking for a different answer, it looks uncannily like a map of a solar system when they count the orbs. What if this wasn't just a pretty pattern? What if it was a diagram? It's a tantalizing, almost irresistible thought, though if you were trying to navigate using this, you would probably end up in the wrong galaxy. Ancient star maps weren't exactly Google Maps. The myths seem to support this idea of a physical journey. They talk of the Anunnaki Council, convened in their celestial home, making a decision to journey to a new world, Earth. They weren't just randomly popping into existence on a mountaintop. They arrived and they got to work. And honestly, if a group of shining beings descended from the sky today, we wouldn't be calling them gods. We'd have 4 Kelvin drone footage, 1,000 different camera angles on social media, and a dedicated cable news panel arguing about their intentions before they even took their helmets off. The Samrians had only clay and stylus. They described what they saw in the only terms they had, the language of the divine and the majestic. So you are left in this quiet, dusty room, holding the evidence of their beliefs in your hand. The academic world tells you it's mythology, a rich and complex tapestry of stories created to explain the world. Why the rivers flood, why the crops grow, why society is structured the way it is. It is the story of humanity's relationship with the awesome and often terrifying forces of nature, personified as powerful gods. And yet, the stories feel so strangely specific. They talk of long journeys, of orbital mechanics, of specific numbers of crew members. They seem less like allegories and more like mission logs. It's a subtle distinction, but it's a profound one. Were the Sumerians creating gods to explain the universe, or were they documenting the arrival of beings so advanced? God was the only word that fit. The tablet in your hand feels heavier now, a fulcrum upon which the entire mystery balances. The question of what the Anunnaki were, gods or visitors, still hangs in the dusty air of the tablet house. You gently place the cylinder seal back on its shelf and pick up another tablet, this one telling a different kind of story. It's less about arrivals and cosmic journeys and more about what happened after they settled in. As you decipher the wedge-shaped symbols, you realize that if these beings were a divine celestial board of directors, their meetings must have been an absolute nightmare. The story of the Anunnaki is not one of monolithic unified purpose. It's a story of factions, of arguments, of deep-seated family drama, and at the heart of it all are 2 figures, 2 brothers whose eternal squabbling would shape the destiny of the entire planet. If you were hoping for a serene, all-knowing pantheon, you've come to the wrong mythology. This is much more interesting. On one side, you have Enlil. You can picture him clearly from the descriptions. Stern, powerful, being of immense authority and very little patience. In the official Sumerian pantheon, he is the god of wind, air, and storms, and his name is often translated as Lord of the Command. He is the ultimate authority on earth, the COO of the entire operation, tasked by their father, the distant sky god Anu, with managing the new terrestrial colony. Enlil is all about order, hierarchy, and getting the job done. He's the kind of boss who would invent performance reviews and then schedule them for a Friday afternoon. The texts paint him as often irritable, particularly when it comes to the noisy, messy business of other living creatures. He values his peace and quiet, and he doesn't suffer fools or really anyone else gladly. On the other side, you have his half-brother Enki. If Enlil is the stern commander, Enki is the brilliant and often mischievous head of research and development. His name means Lord of the Earth. But his domain is the Absu, the freshwater ocean believed to exist deep beneath the ground. He is the god of water, yes, but also of knowledge, wisdom, magic, and creation. He is the scientist, the artist, the engineer, where Enlil is rigid, Enki is flexible, where Enlil sees problems to be eliminated, Enki sees puzzles to be solved. He's depicted as being profoundly clever, master of technology and invention, but also more approachable and crucially more sympathetic to the lesser beings in the cosmic hierarchy, especially humans. He's the kind of manager who knows all the loopholes and the rules that his brother wrote. The fundamental conflict between these two powerful beings is the engine that drives most of Sumerian mythology. You can see it in countless stories etched into these tablets. Enlil demands work. Enki devises a way to make it easier. Enlil gets annoyed by the noise of a growing population. Enki schemes to protect them. It's a classic sibling rivalry played out on a planetary scale. A celestial version of every family argument you've ever witnessed, except with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. You could make a killer reality show out of it, keeping up with the Anunnaki. One of the most fascinating elements of their power struggle involves something called the me. These are described as a set of divine decrees or sacred laws that are fundamental to the running of civilization. They contain everything from the principles of kingship and law to the knowledge of crafts like woodworking and metallurgy. The quirky thing is, in some myths, the Mai aren't just abstract concepts. They're actual physical objects, perhaps tablets or other items that could be held, worn, or even stolen. Sumerologists still debate the full meaning and scope of the Mi, whether they were tangible objects, abstract concepts, or a complex legal and philosophical framework for their society. Whatever they were, Enki was their original guardian. In one famous story, the goddess Inanna, a granddaughter of Enlil, travels to visit Enki, gets him completely drunk on beer and coaxes him into giving her dozens of the me, which she then spirits away to her own city of Uruk. It's a hilarious tale of divine carelessness, like leaving the nuclear launch codes on a bar stool after one too many cosmic ales. Enki wakes up with a hangover and a massive sense of regret, but it's too late. The story underscores his occasionally fallible, very ungodlike nature. This rivalry wasn't just for sport, it had profound consequences. You find a tablet that tells of the lesser gods, the Igi, who were tasked with the backbreaking labor of digging out the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. After centuries of toil, they go on strike. They burn their tools and surround Enlil's house, refusing to work any longer. Enlil, in his typical fashion, is furious and wants to punish them severely. But Enki, ever the problem solver, comes up with a different solution. He proposes a plan to their council. Let's not punish the workers. Instead, let's create a new being, a substitute specifically designed to take over the hard labor. Let us create a primitive worker. And with that suggestion, the fate of a certain bipedal ape, happily minding its own business somewhere in Africa, was about to change forever. The creation of humanity in these tales wasn't a grand, benevolent act. It was a practical, slightly cynical solution to a labor dispute brokered by Enki to appease his furious, overstressed brother. The fate of our entire species born from an argument between management and a unionized workforce. It doesn't get more dramatic or more strangely relatable than that. The weight of Enki's proposal to solve a labor dispute by creating a new species still hangs in the quiet air of the tablet library. It's a solution so audacious, so cynically practical that it sends a little shiver down your spine. You carefully place that tablet back on its shelf and your eyes fall upon a different kind of document. It's a large four-sided clay prism standing upright like a strange trophy. It's covered not in neat columns of text. It looks like a ledger, an inventory, an ancient spreadsheet. This is a version of the Sumerian king list, one of the most enigmatic and frustrating artifacts ever unearthed from the Mesopotamian sands. You lean closer, tracing the lines of cuneiform with your finger. The document begins with a pronouncement that is both simple and stunning. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Aridu. It doesn't say kingship was invented or that it evolved from chiefdoms. It says it descended like a technology or a gift or a corporate mandate from head office. And then the list begins. In the city of Aridu, the first king was a ruler named Alulim. You scan across to the next column, the one that lists the length of his reign. Your brain stumbles for a moment trying to process the number. It says he ruled for 28,800 years. You blink, assuming you've misread the ancient script. You read the next line. The second king, Al-Alana, ruled for 36,000 years, and on it goes. The list details 8 kings ruling from 5 different cities for a combined total of 241,200 years. A single political term lasting for nearly 29 millennia would make even the most entrenched modern politicians look like temporary interns. What do you even do for that long? You'd run out of hobbies by the 3rd millennium and probably spend the rest of your reign just trying to remember where you left your chariot keys. It's a set of numbers so fantastically impossible that it seems like a joke, a clear, unambiguous signal that you are now in the realm of pure myth. And this is, of course, the mainstream historical view. The Sumerian king list is a real artifact. Several copies exist, with the well-blundled prism being one of the most complete. Historians widely agree that these early antediluvian, meaning before the flood, reigns are not literal history. They are mythological. The immense numbers were likely symbolic, meant to convey an immeasurable sense of deep time, divine favor, and legitimacy for the entire institution of kingship. Perhaps it was a political tool. Imagine you're a king in, say, 2000 BC with a shaky claim to the throne. What better way to legitimize your rule than to produce a document showing an unbroken chain of command stretching back 250,000 years, all ordained from heaven? Historians still argue about the true purpose of the king list. Was it a political tool to establish legitimacy, a genuine attempt at history using faulty sources, or a blend of mythological storytelling and scribal record keeping? But as you stare at the precise, carefully inscribed numbers, another more unsettling possibility whispers from the clay. What if it's not a metaphor? The ancient astronaut theory looks at a document like this and doesn't see symbolism. It sees data. It asks a simple question. What if these first 8 kings weren't human? What if they were the Anunnaki themselves, ruling directly over their new domain? Or perhaps their direct descendants, beings with lifespans that made a human life seem like the flicker of a firefly. To a being who lives for 50,000 years, a reign of 28,800 years is not an eternity. It's just a long career. The list isn't an exaggeration. It's a literal record. And the problem isn't with the data, it's with our human-centric assumptions. Maybe the scribes weren't trying to be poetic. Maybe they were just writing down what they were told, scratching their heads and carving the unbelievable numbers as instructed. Are you sure, my lord? 43,200 years. Okay? Your reign, your rules, then you see the line that changes everything. After the 8th king, the text notes bluntly, then the flood swept over. There is a clean break in the record. The slate is wiped clean. And then the next line, after the flood swept over and the kingship descended from heaven a second time, the kingship was in Kish, a new city, a new start. You scan the names of the kings who ruled after the flood. Their reigns are different, still incredibly long by our standards. The first post-flood king ruled for 1,200 years, but a dramatic drop from the 0,000 year reigns from before. As you read further down the list, the numbers keep getting smaller and smaller, from thousands to hundreds to numbers that are almost plausible. Eventually, you reach names that historians can actually cross-reference with other archaeological finds like Gilgamesh, the legendary king of Uruk, who is listed with a much more modest reign of 126 years. This sudden shift is what makes the king list so compelling. If it were all just myth, why the change in scale? Why not just keep the fantastical numbers going? For the mainstream historian, it shows the list gradually merging from myth into a more factual historical record. For the fringe theorist, it's a clear signal of a change in policy. Perhaps the long-lived, pure-blooded Anunnaki rulers were replaced by hybrid demigods with diluted bloodlines and shorter lifespans. The list in this view is a record of a genetic timeline, the slow fade out of an alien dynasty. You are left staring at this strange document, a king-size genealogical chart that straddles the line between history and legend. It feels less like a myth and more like a corrupted file. A historical database where the first few entries are so outlandish they make you question everything that follows. Your mind is still reeling from the impossible numbers on the king list. That strange accounting of millennial-long reigns that ended in a great flood. You gently set the clay prism aside and your gaze returns to the endless shelves of tablets. You feel a pull to go back not just before the flood but before the kings, before the very first city. You want to understand the beginning of the story for the subjects of those kings. Your fingers find a large flat tablet. It's ununiform, telling the story known to scholars as the Atrahasis epic. This text is a cornerstone for mainstream Assyriology, a source that provides one of the most complete Mesopotamian accounts of both creation and the flood. But reading it here in the silence feels less like academic study and more like uncovering a secret history. The story starts not with humanity but with the gods, and it confirms what you learned earlier. They were in the middle of a serious crisis. It was the universe's worst HR dispute. The junior gods, the Yigi, had been tasked with all the manual labor, digging the great rivers, dredging the canals, building the Anunnaki settlements. For centuries they toiled, but their patience finally ran out. They burned their shovels, abandoned their posts, and marched on the house of the chief commander. Enlil, the project of building a world, was grinding to a halt because the workforce had gone on strike. Enlil, true to form, is enraged and wants to make an example of the ringleaders. The Divine Council is in an uproar. But then Enki, the master inventor and peacemaker, steps forward. He has an idea. He speaks to the assembly. His words, a bomb on their frayed nerves. He suggests they don't need to punish the Yigi. They just need a replacement workforce. He proposes the creation of a new being, a Lulu, a primitive worker to bear the workload, a being fashioned specifically for the task. The council agrees. The project is green-lit, but the creation of humanity as described in this text is not a simple act of divine magic. It's a very specific and very strange biological procedure. You read on completely captivated as Enki lays out the recipe. First, they need the right base material. He calls for clay, but not just any handful of dirt. It must be clay from the edge of the Opsu, his domain of primordial subterranean fresh water. It's the purest clay, a mixture of the earth's flesh and the life-giving waters. This is the terrestrial component, the hardware. But hardware is useless without software. The new creature needed more than just form. It needed a spark, an animating force, a measure of intelligence to understand commands. For this, they needed a divine ingredient. And this is where the story takes a turn into the truly eyebrow-raising. The council decides that a god must be sacrificed. His essence will be used to bind the clay to give the new creature a spirit, a ghost in the machine. The god they choose is named Gishtui, a deity described in the text as having intelligence. He wasn't a bad guy. He just drew the cosmic short straw. He really took one for the team. In a solemn ritual, his life force is taken. And this divine essence, what the text calls his blood and spirit, is mixed with the clay from the Obzu. Academics debate whether the blood of the god was meant literally or as a metaphor for divine intelligence and personality, the essential something that would elevate this new creature above the other beasts of the field. Either way, the cocktail of ingredients is now ready. Worldly clay infused with the essence of a sacrificed god. But the process isn't over. This potent mixture isn't just shaped into a doll and brought to life with a lightning bolt. The text describes the next step that feels unnervingly clinical. The prepared clay is given to Ni, the mother goddess, a specialist in this field. She divides the mixture into 14 pieces. 7 are used to gestate males and 7 to gestate females. These pieces are then implanted into the wombs of 14 womb goddesses who act as the first surrogate mothers. It reads less like a myth and more like a dispatch from the universe's first advanced surrogacy clinic. There is a set gestation period. The goddesses wait, the Anunnaki wait, and after the specified time has passed, Ni announces her success. The first humans are born. You sit back from the tablet, the weight of the story settling upon you. This is no gentle tale of a benevolent father creating children in his own image. This is a story of bioengineering. It's the story of a master class of beings fabricating a subservient species for a single overriding purpose: to work to take the yoke of the gods. The divine spark that supposedly makes humanity special is in this, telling a feature added by the engineers. It's the ghost of a sacrificed being, forever binding humanity to the will of its creators. We were made to be slaves. We were designed to be intelligent enough to follow orders, but not so intelligent as to question them. At least that was the plan. You look down at the tablet again, at the story of our own creation, and you can't help but feel a profound and unsettling chill. The shadow of the ziggurat you saw earlier now feels longer and much, much darker. The heavy truth of the creation story settles on you like a shroud. You need air. You quietly leave the house of tablets, stepping back out into the cool Mesopotamian night. The city is still. The smells of bread and livestock have faded, replaced by the clean, earthy scent of dust and distance. Your gaze is drawn once again to the immense dark shape that dominates the skyline. The ziggurat, before it was a symbol of faith, a monument to the gods. But now, with the story of the Aigi strike and Enki's chillingly practical solution fresh in your mind, it looks like something else entirely. It looks like a tool, a piece of corporate infrastructure, and you feel an irresistible urge to see it up close, to understand it from a new perspective. You begin to climb the massive central staircase. The mud brick steps are wide and steep, worn into shallow bowls by the passage of countless feet over countless centuries. There are no handrails, of course. Ancient safety regulations were clearly a little lax. With each step upward, the sleeping city spreads out below you like a dark patterned carpet. The narrow streets you walked earlier are now just thin black lines separating the blocky shapes of the houses. The world grows quieter. The small sounds of the city fading away until all you can hear is the soft whisper of the wind and the sound of your own breathing. You are ascending literally and figuratively, leaving the world of the newly created workers behind and climbing towards the domain of their masters. With every terrace you reach, you pause, looking at the sheer scale of the construction. Mainstream history tells us a crucial fact: ziggurats were not tombs. Unlike the Great Pyramids of Egypt, which were built to house the remains of pharaohs for their journey into the afterlife, these structures were solid. They were, in essence, man-made mountains with a small building on the very top. This shrine, the Jigunu, wasn't for burials. It was intended as a dwelling place, a temporary residence for the city's patron god when they chose to descend from the heavens and visit their people. It was a divine hotel, the penthouse suite in the grandest structure the Samrians could build, a tangible meeting point between the earthly and the divine. But as you continue your climb, your modern mind, now armed with the Anunnaki as visitors theory, starts to play with that definition, dwelling place for a being who comes from the sky. The wind picks up, whistling through the cracks in the ancient brickwork, and it almost sounds like it's asking a question. What if the function was more literal? You reach the next level and look at the structure, not as a temple, but as a piece of technology. The tiered design, the massive flat platforms, the central staircase reaching for the sky. Does it remind you of anything? To a fringe theorist, a ziggurat doesn't look like a mountain. It looks like a launch gantry. It looks like the massive platforms at Cape Canaveral or Baikonur, designed to support and service a vehicle that travels to the stars. Was the shrine at the top just a place for priests to leave offerings of food and drink? Or was it a control room, a docking clamp, a refueling station for the celestial boats and shining chariots described in the myths? Maybe the whole structure was a massive power conductor drawing energy from the earth or the atmosphere. Or perhaps it was a communications array, a giant antenna for sending and receiving messages from their home world. A divine cell tower, but with way better reception and absolutely no data caps. While most archaeologists agree on the ziggurats' primary religious function, there is still some discussion regarding their secondary roles, such as their precise use in astronomical observation and chondrical calculations. They were certainly aligned with celestial bodies, but was that for marking seasons or for marking arrival and departure windows? Finally, you reach the summit. The original shrine is long gone, weathered away by thousands of years of sun and wind. But you stand on the flat expanse where it once was. You are at the highest point in the entire region. The sky is a vast, overwhelming dome of brilliant stars. The Milky Way is a luminous slash across the darkness. Up here, at the nexus point between heaven and earth, the ambiguity is dizzying. You look down at the city, a sprawling grid of sleeping manufactured laborers. You look up at the sky, the supposed home of the beings who made them, and you stand on the very structure designed to connect the two. Is this a monument of faith, a testament to the human need to reach for something greater than itself? Or is it a piece of derelict alien technology, its true purpose forgotten and repurposed as religion? The Sumerians call the great ziggurat of Babylon the Manankani, the temple of the foundation of heaven and earth. Are we talking about a symbolic foundation or a physical one? The wind blows cool against your face, carrying with it the silence of the ages. The ziggurat gives no answers. It just stands here, a magnificent, infuriating puzzle of mud, brick, and myth. Its secrets held as tightly as the stars above. The wind whipping across the top of the ziggurat carries a new scent. It's the smell of ozone, of distant rain, of a storm gathering just beyond the horizon of your imagination. A phantom chill runs through you, and you feel an urge to descend, to seek shelter from a cataclysm that happened millennia ago. You carefully make your way back down the great staircase, leaving the ambiguous monument behind, and find yourself once more in the quiet sanctuary of the tablet house. Drawn by some unseen instinct, you move towards a specific shelf and pick up a tablet that is famous the world over. This is Tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh, containing a story so profound it is echoed through nearly every culture on earth. It is the story of the Great Flood. As you trace the symbols, you realize a stunning historical fact. This version of the story, this Sumerian and later Babylonian account, predates the biblical story of Noah and his ark by at least 1,000 years. The tale of a world washed clean by water is not unique, but its earliest known written form is right here, etched into this very clay. You delve into the narrative, and the reason for the impending disaster is frankly bizarre. It wasn't because of humanity's wickedness, their sins, or their moral corruption. The problem, according to the text, was that they were too loud. The human race, Anki's little worker project, had been immensely successful. They had multiplied and spread across the land. And all their activity, their building, their farming, their living, created a constant clamor, a noise that traveled all the way up to the heavens and severely disturbed the chief god and hill. He couldn't get any sleep. After millennia of putting up with it, he'd finally had enough. He was the ultimate grumpy landlord, and his tenants were having a party that had gone on for far too long. Enlil convenes the Anunnaki Council. He makes his case, arguing that the only way to get some peace and quiet is to wipe the slate clean, a great flood to eliminate humanity once and for all. This time the council agrees. Perhaps they too were tired of the noise, or maybe they just didn't want to argue with their fearsome commander. They all swear a solemn oath to let the flood happen, and crucially to keep it a secret from all mortals. Humanity is to be given no warning, but Enki, the conflicted creator, is in a bind. He is sworn to secrecy by the council's oath, but he can't stand by and watch his creation be utterly annihilated. So, in an act of sublime trickery, he finds a loophole. He travels to the city of Shuruppak, to the home of a righteous man named Utnapishtim. He doesn't speak to Utnapishtim directly. That would break his oath. Instead, he stands outside and pretends to speak to the wall of the man's reed hut, knowing full well that Utnapishtim is listening on the other side. It's the divine equivalent of an accidental butt dial, a carefully orchestrated bit of plausible deniability. Reed wall, he whispers. Tear down your house and build a boat. Abandon your possessions and save your life. He gives the wall specific instructions, the exact dimensions for the vessel, the need for a roof, and the critical importance of sealing every seam with bitumen, that same sticky asphalt you saw holding the city walls together. He tells the wall to have its owner take aboard his family, his craftsmen, and the seed of all living things. Utnapishtim, of course, understands. He builds the great boat in secret, and just as it's finished, the storm begins. The description of the deluge is terrifying. The sky darkens. The dams of the heavens are opened and the waters of the abyss surge upwards. Even the gods are scared, retreating to the highest heaven and cowering like dogs. For 6 days and 7 nights, the world is pummeled by wind and rain until everything is submerged and a vast, terrible silence falls over the face of the water. Geologists and archaeologists continue to debate whether the prevalence of flood myths in this region corresponds to a specific catastrophic historical flood of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, or if it reflects a more general, ever-present fear of seasonal inundation in a land defined by 2 unpredictable rivers. Whatever its origin, the story is powerful. The boat eventually comes to rest on the peak of a mountain. Utnapishtim sends out a dove, then a swallow, then a raven. When the raven doesn't return, he knows that dry land has appeared. He opens the doors of his ark and makes a sacrifice to the gods. The aroma wafts upwards, and the gods who had been without their human servants and their offerings for a week gathered like flies around the smoke. But when Enlil arrives and sees the boat, he is livid. Someone has survived. His plan for a quiet life has been foiled. Enki is forced to confess, but he argues passionately, persuading Enlil to allow humanity to continue, albeit with some new population control measures to keep the noise down from now on. You lean back, the clay tablet resting in your lap. This isn't just a story of survival, it's another chapter in the Anunnaki family drama. Humanity exists in a perpetual to-go-for between a God who sees us as a noisy pest to be eliminated and a God who sees us as a flawed but essential part of his own legacy. Our continued existence wasn't guaranteed by divine love, but was secured by a clever lie, a sturdy boat, and a well-timed barbecue. You place the flood tablet gently back on its dusty shelf, the epic tale of destruction and survival echoing in the silent room. The story leaves you with a profound sense of humanity's precarious place in the cosmos. A species saved from the brink by a bit of divine subterfuge. This leads you to a new line of questioning. After the flood, after the world was reset, what did the survivors know? What knowledge was painstakingly preserved from the drowned world and what was lost forever beneath the silt? Your attention shifts from the tablets of myth and legend to the others. The ones that look less like stories and more like raw data. You begin to sift through the archives. You find tablets covered not in epic poetry, but in dense, compact lists of numbers and symbols. You see charts mapping the movements of stars and planets, records of commodity prices, legal codes, and medical texts describing diagnosis and prescriptions. This is the lost knowledge, the operating system of their civilization, all recorded in the intricate cuneiform script. Learning this wedge-based writing was an arduous task, a skill reserved for a dedicated class of scribes who spent years in training doing advanced trigonometry by pressing a stylus into wet clay. Certainly makes you appreciate your smartphone's calculator app, but the complexity of the script hints at the complexity of the information it was designed to carry. Your eyes are drawn to the astronomical tablets. Here, the accomplishments of the Mesopotamian cultures truly shine. It's a well-established historical fact that the Babylonians, the heirs to the Sumerian legacy, were exceptionally sophisticated astronomers. They used a sexagesimal or base 60 mathematical system, a legacy you still honor every time you look at a clock or measure a circle in 360 degrees. These ancient stargazers created detailed star catalogs and using their advanced math could track the movements of the planets with startling accuracy. They recorded the path of Venus, they noted the retrograde motion of Jupiter, and most impressively, they could predict lunar and even solar eclipses. Historians and archaeoastronomers are still deciphering the full extent of Babylonian astronomical knowledge, debating whether their predictions were based on complex mathematical models or the result of centuries of meticulous long-term empirical observation. But as you stare at a tablet predicting an eclipse hundreds of years in the future, the Anunnaki theory whispers a different explanation. Where did this incredible knowledge come from? Was it developed slowly through generations of human ingenuity, or was it a download? The myths you've already encountered suggest that civilization itself was a gift from the gods. This brings you back to the central family conflict. You can easily imagine Enlil's perspective. He was a big believer in information silos, a very need-to-know basis kind of guy. To him, humanity was the workforce. The last thing you want is for your workforce to get too smart. Knowledge creates ambition, it creates questions, it creates a desire for independence. To keep humanity subservient, you would keep them in the dark, teaching them only what they needed to perform their duties. Then there's Enki, the rebel scientist, the creator, who seemed to have a soft spot for his creation. The fringe theory posits that Enki was the great teacher, the one who secretly fed humanity the forbidden knowledge. Against the direct orders of his commander, he may have gifted humanity the secrets of agriculture, medicine, law, and astronomy. He was the divine Prometheus. But instead of just giving us fire, he slipped us a graphing calculator and a copy of the Farmer's Almanac. This paints the dawn of human intellect not as a natural evolution, but as an act of cosmic industrial espionage. Every leap forward in human understanding was a quiet act of rebellion, a secret passed from a sympathetic god to his favorite creatures. So you look at these tablets again, this trove of ununiform data with a new and unsettling filter. Are you looking at the birth of human science or a heavily redacted user manual? The medical texts list hundreds of plants and minerals and their uses. Is this the work of ancient doctors experimenting for centuries, or is it a selection from a much larger pharmaceutical database? The star charts are incredibly precise. Are they the result of patient observation, or are they a simplified map of the local stellar neighborhood with the more interesting destinations intentionally left out? The knowledge is real, its sophistication is undeniable, but its origin is the mystery. The tablets feel less like a record of human discovery and more like a carefully curated starter pack. It's enough information to build a functional civilization, to manage resources, to feed a population, and to keep the gold mines a topic for another time, running efficiently. But it's perhaps just limited enough to keep that same civilization from asking the biggest questions, from developing the technology to leave the planet, from turning their gaze back to the heavens and saying, "We're coming to see you now." You are surrounded by a library of secrets, guarded not by locks and keys, but by the veil of myth and the passage of time, leaving you to wonder what other knowledge remains hidden in these clay hard drives, waiting for the right person to finally log in. You are surrounded by a library of what feels like guarded information. The astronomical charts and mathematical formulas hinting at a knowledge far beyond what should have been possible. But humanity wasn't the only subject of interest in these texts. You put down the tablet of star charts and pick up one filled, not with numbers, but with images and epic poems. As your mind deciphers the scenes, you realize that the world of the Anunnaki was populated by more than just gods and their human workers. It was a world teeming with beings that crawl right out of a fever dream. It seems that once you have the technology for bioengineering, you don't just stop after one successful project. You experiment. Your imagination drifts out of the tablet house and back to the grand gateways of the city. Standing guard there, you would have seen the colossal statues of the Lamassu. This is a well-known mainstream fact of Mesopotamian art. These magnificent beings were apotropaic spirits. powerful guardians meant to ward off evil. You can picture them now. The massive body of a bull symbolizing strength, the great wings of an eagle representing swiftness and divinity, and the calm, intelligent, bearded face of a human king. They are a fusion of the best attributes of different creatures, a powerful and reassuring presence at the threshold of civilization. To the average Samaran, they were a comfort, a sign that their city was protected by potent magic. But as you now know, in the Anunnaki story, magic might just be another word for technology. You look at the Lamassu with new eyes. Is it just a symbol? Or is it a portrait, a depiction of a real creature, an engineered guard dog for a civilization? You delve back into the tablets looking for more. You find them in the great creation epic, the Anuma Elish. The story tells of the primordial mother goddess, Tiamat, who in her war against the younger gods gives birth to an army of monsters. The text lists them: horrifying serpents, lion demons, scorpion men, fishmen, and other ferocious hybrids. These aren't the noble Lamassu. These are weapons, a biological army created for a divine war. This is where the fringe theory takes root and grows into a strange and thorny tree. If Enki and the mother goddesses had the know-how to combine the essence of a god with the clay of the earth to create humanity, what's to stop them from mixing and matching other species? What if their creation of Homo sapiens was just the final successful project after a long and messy period of research and development? You can almost picture a divine laboratory filled with glowing liquids and strange apparatuses with Enki at the helm, looking a bit like a mad scientist. Okay, the scorpion man was a bit much. You can imagine another god saying, "Let's dial back the pincers on the next one." The litany of monsters in the myths suddenly starts to sound less like mythological fantasy and more like a list of failed prototypes. A cosmic beta test that resulted in some very, very weird character models. Art historians and mythologists constantly debate the symbolic evolution of these creatures, trying to determine if they represent the subjugation of chaos by the forces of order, a fusion of desirable divine attributes, or something else entirely. But the alternative is so much more direct. What if the Samrians drew these things because at some point in their distant ancestral past, their people had actually seen them? What if the collective memory of humanity was haunted by the ghosts of God's abandoned experiments? The trail of evidence, thin as it may be, continues. You find mention of the Akalu, a group of 7 sages who are said to have lived before the flood. They were teachers credited with giving humanity the foundations of civilization, the same knowledge you were just pondering. But in many depictions, the Abkalu are not fully human. They're often shown as fishmen or as humans wearing what looks like a fishskin cloak. Were these sages another of Enki's creations? A specialized hybrid designed to survive in the water of his Abzu domain, who was sent out as humanity's first teachers. The sheer variety is baffling. It's a menagerie of chimers. It suggests that for the Anunnaki, life wasn't sacred and fixed. It was malleable. It was a raw material like the clay they used for their bricks and their tablets. They could add wings here, a scorpion's tail there, a fish's head on a man's body. They weren't just building a civilization. They were populating an ecosystem with their own custom designed creatures. The world they ruled over must have been a very strange place indeed. One where the lines between animal, human and God were not only blurry but routinely and deliberately crossed. You're left holding a tablet with the carving of a muscular man with the head of a lion, and you feel a deep primordial strangeness. Is this just a symbol of a king's ferocity, or is it a memory of something that once walked the earth? Another product of the Anunnaki's genetic workshop, now thankfully lost to the mists of time. You are left in the silent, dusty tablet house with the chilling image of a genetic workshop, a place where gods played with the building blocks of life, creating humanity and a host of strange chimeric beasts. A question massive and final begins to form in your mind. If they were so powerful, if they built these cities, engineered life and ruled for millennia, where did they go? It's perhaps the greatest loose end in this entire cosmic story. You begin to search for an answer, sorting through the clay records moving forward in time. As you progress through the centuries, you notice a subtle but profound shift in the narrative. In the earliest Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki are characters. They are physically present. They chair council meetings, inspect canals, get annoyed by noise, and speak directly to their chosen human servants. But as you move forward into the eras of the Akkadian Empire and later the Babylonians and Assyrians, the gods begin to change. This is a solid mainstream historical fact. The old Sumerian gods were gradually absorbed into new pantheons through a process called syncretism. Enlil and Enki didn't simply vanish. They were merged with other deities or had their names changed. The wise and clever Enki became Ea in the Babylonian and Akkadian myths. The ambitious goddess Inanna was fused with other deities to become the powerful and often fearsome Ishtar. Their stories continued, but their nature shifted. They became more remote, more symbolic, more like the gods we think of today. Celestial beings to be worshipped from afar, not powerful figures you might bump into while they inspect a construction site. The mainstream explanation for this fading away is tied to the decline of the Sumerian civilization itself. Historians debate the precise reasons for this decline, citing a combination of devastating factors. From centuries of irrigation that led to crippling soil salinization to catastrophic climate change that altered river flows to relentless and exhausting warfare between the rival city-states, as Sumerian culture waned, new powers rose and they adapted the old religion to fit their new world view. The Anunnaki didn't fly away. They were simply retired, rebranded, and mythologized by succeeding generations. It's a neat, logical explanation that fits the historical record, and yet it feels incomplete. As you sit here amidst the evidence of their supposed works, it feels too simple. The fringe theories offer other, more tantalizing possibilities. The first is the most straightforward. Their work was done and they left. The Earth project had reached a stable phase. They had created their workforce, taught them just enough to be self-sufficient, established the institution of kingship to manage them, and extracted whatever resource they came here for. Perhaps the gold that is so often mentioned in the texts, like cosmic contractors who have finished a very long and difficult job, they packed up their advanced tools, left humanity with a very long list of chores, and pointed their celestial boats back towards home. No big farewell tour, no final speech, just a quiet, efficient withdrawal, very mysterious and very on brand. A second more conspiratorial theory suggests they didn't leave the planet just the public eye. They initiated a strategic retreat. Perhaps after the flood and humanity's subsequent proliferation, direct management became too messy, too hands-on. So they handed over the keys to a carefully selected line of human rulers. The demigods and heroes who filled the post-flood section of the king list. Then the Anunnaki themselves simply vanished from sight. But they didn't go far. Some theories propose they retreated into vast, technologically advanced subterranean realms, turning the mythical Abzu into a literal underground haven. Others suggest they established bases in the most remote and insular ranges or at the bottom of the deepest oceans. From these hidden sanctuaries, they could continue to monitor their experiment without getting their hands dirty. The final possibility is perhaps the most unnerving. They didn't go underground, they went up. They retreated into orbit or into a dimension just outside our own perception. Using their incomprehensible technology to remain perfectly hidden, they simply switched from direct on-site management to remote administration. It's the ultimate remote work setup. Really, in this scenario, they never left at all. They are still here watching, observing, perhaps subtly guiding the course of human history. We are the ongoing experiment. The ziggurats are no longer active. The strange hybrids have died out. But the project itself, humanity, is still running. We are a self-sustaining farm, and the farmers are still checking in on their crop. You look up from the last clay tablet, your mind swimming with these possibilities. Did they leave us behind? An abandoned project left to our own devices? Or are we still being guided by unseen hands? our progress and our conflicts, just data points in a report for a distant or perhaps not so distant CEO. Their disappearance from the record isn't a clean ending. It's a cliffhanger that has lasted for 4,000 years, leaving you with the strange, disquing feeling that the story isn't really over. The silence in the tablet house is now filled with the enormous question of the Anunnaki's disappearance. Did they leave or are they just hiding? The thought propels your consciousness outward beyond the mud brick walls of this Sumerian city, beyond the land between two rivers. If a technologically advanced civilization truly operated on Earth for thousands of years, their influence wouldn't be confined to a single region. There would be echoes, a global footprint, a signature style left behind in the foundations of other ancient cultures. Your sleepy journey continues, drifting on the wind across deserts and oceans, searching for these echoes. You first drift west over the harsh deserts of the Sinai until you see the lush green ribbon of the Nile. Ancient Egypt, a civilization as grand and as enigmatic as Sumer, but with its own unique flavor. And yet, as you sift through its myths, you find familiar themes. The Egyptians worshipped a vast pantheon of gods who, like the Anunnaki, had very human-like dramas and conflicts. You meet the god Thoth with the head of an ibis, the divine scribe who brought wisdom, writing, and magic to the Egyptian people. He feels remarkably similar to the Sumerian Enki, the god of knowledge and creation, the great teacher of mankind. Could they be the same figure wearing a different cultural mask? Divine kingship is also a cornerstone of both societies. The pharaoh was not just a ruler, he was a living god, Horus incarnate, the intermediary between the heavens and the earth. Much like the priest kings of Sumer, it's almost as if the same celestial corporation set up franchises in different regions, each with its own unique local branding. Your journey continues eastward now over the mountains of Persia and into the plains of the Indus Valley and further into the heart of India. Here in the ancient Vedic texts, you find tales that resonate with the Sambrian myths. You read of the great flood hero Manu, who is warned by the god Vishnu in the form of a fish to build a great boat to survive a world drowning deluge. The parallels to the story of Utnapishtim and Enki are unmistakable. You also read of Waimius, the flying palaces or chariots of the gods described in the Hindu epics. These are not just poetic metaphors. The texts sometimes describe them in incredible detail as multi-story flying machines that could travel through the sky, a concept that sounds uncannily like the sky chariots or celestial boats of the Anunnaki. Of course, the mainstream explanation for these similarities is quite grounded. We know for a fact that there were extensive trade and cultural links between Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley civilization. Ideas like goods travel along trade routes. It's entirely plausible that these foundational myths, a great flood, a wise god of knowledge, were a popular cultural export shared and adapted by each civilization over centuries. This leads to one of the great questions in the field. Comparative mythologists endlessly debate the diffusion versus independent invention theory. Did these core myths spread from a single source like a virus of ideas, or do they arise independently in different cultures because they tap into universal human archetypes and fears? It's the nature versus nurture argument for mythology. But then your journey takes you across the vast empty expanse of the Pacific Ocean to a place that supposedly had no contact with the ancient Near East, Mesoamerica. Here among themes, the Maya and the Aztecs, the echoes become stranger and more specific. You see carvings of the feathered serpent god Quetzal or Kukulkan, a wise bearded deity who came from the heavens to teach humanity the arts of civilization, agriculture and astronomy before departing with a promise to one day return, another Enki, another Thoth. The similarities are striking, but then you see the truly quirky tidbit, the detail that sends a shiver of strange recognition down your spine. You see a stone carving of a figure, and in his hand he's holding a small peculiar object. It looks for all the world like a handbag or a small bucket, and you realize you have seen it before back in Mesopotamia on the reliefs depicting the Akalu sages, the fishermen teachers and other Anunnaki gods. They too carried these identical handbags. What is this object that it appears in the art of two powerful civilizations separated by an impassable ocean and thousands of years? Mainstream archaeology has no firm answer. Perhaps it's a ceremonial water bucket, a symbol of priestly status, or a basket for collecting pollen. But to a fringe theorist, it is a smoking gun. It is a piece of standardized advanced equipment, a power pack, a toolkit, the ultimate ancient accessory that apparently goes with everything from a Sambrian robe to a Mayan headdress. The Maidan century was a time of immense technological change and social anxiety. The space race was on, UFO sightings were a cultural phenomenon, and the dawn of the atomic age made humanity feel both incredibly powerful and terrifyingly fragile. It was the perfect fertile ground for radical new ideas about our own origins. Authors like Eric Fondin threw a match on this kind, Yakin, with his 1968 book Chariots of the Gods, which posed the question directly, what if the gods of antiquity were actually extraterrestrial visitors? But it was another author who would focus this broad question like a laser beam onto ancient Sumer. His name was Zechariah Sitchin. Sitchin was the man who took the fragmented Samrian myths, the creation of humanity, the feuding gods, the great flood, the impossibly long-lived kings, and assembled them into a single grand unified theory. It's a crucial fact to note that Sitchin was not a formally trained historian, archaeologist, or linguist in the academic sense. He was an Azerbaijani-born author and businessman with a passion for ancient history and a self-taught understanding of cuneiform. This is the primary reason his work is almost universally dismissed by mainstream scholars. But to his millions of readers, he was a brilliant decoder, a man who saw a literal story where academics saw only metaphor. At the heart of Sitchin's theory is his most famous and foundational claim, the existence of a 12th member of our solar system, counting the sun, moon, and the 9 planets we know. He called this planet Nibiru, the home world of the Anunnaki. According to his translation of the texts, Nibiru is on a vast, highly elliptical orbit that takes 3,600 Earth years to complete. Its periodic passage through the inner solar system was, in his view, the catalyst for its inhabitants to visit Earth. This 3600-year cycle called Ashar became the key to understanding everything from the timing of their arrivals to the impossibly long reigns of the kings. With Nibiru established, Sitchin provided a motive. Why did they come here? He claimed it was to mine gold, not for jewelry or currency, but for survival. Nibiru's atmosphere was failing, and the Anunnaki needed vast quantities of gold to grind into a microfine powder and suspend in their upper atmosphere, creating an artificial shield to trap heat and radiation. It's the most elaborate atmospheric geoengineering project imaginable, and humanity was essentially the contract labor brought in to do the digging. Sitchin's narrative ties it all together. The Anunnaki arrived from Nibiru. Their junior members went on strike. Enki engineered humans to take over the gold mining. They ruled over us for eons. Enlil got fed up and tried to wipe us out with the flood. Enki saved a few of us, and eventually they left. It's the ultimate fan theory of human history. For decades, these ideas were mostly confined to books and niche communities. But then came the 21st century and the rise of cable television. Shows like Ancient Aliens took Sitchin's theories, polished them with dramatic reenactments and CGI, and broadcast them into millions of homes. You know, the style, booming music, quick cuts, and a panel of enthusiastic experts who connect the dots between Egyptian hieroglyphs, Mayan calendars, and Sumerian gods, always ending with a tantalizing question. Is it possible? A drinking game, based on the number of times they say, ancient astronaut theorists believe would lead to a very short and messy evening. You have now tumbled all the way to the bottom of the rabbit hole. The scattered, mysterious whispers from the ancient world have been amplified into a clear, confident, modern voice. It's a seductive voice because it offers what history and archaeology often can't: certainty. It provides a simple, all-encompassing answer to the biggest questions of human existence. Who are we? Why are we here? The story is complete, it's dramatic, and it makes a strange kind of sense. But as you lie here in the quiet dark, you have to wonder, is this the brilliant work of a lone genius who correctly decoded our true history? Or is it simply the greatest, most imaginative and most successful work of historical fan fiction ever created? You are floating in the comfortable certainty of the modern Anunnaki theory. A story so complete and compelling, it seems to answer everything. It's a nice feeling, like finishing a puzzle and seeing the whole picture for the first time. But just as you get settled, a different voice enters the quiet space of your mind. It's a calm, methodical, and deeply skeptical voice. The lights of the cozy, speculative theater dim, and you find yourself instead in a stark, brightly lit lecture hall. You are now sitting in on the other side of the conversation. The ongoing and often heated academic debate between the fringe theorists and the mainstream scholars. On one side of the stage is the grand unified theory you just learned, a tale of visiting aliens, gold mines, and genetic engineering. On the other side stands a panel of archaeologists, linguists, and historians armed not with sweeping narratives but with peer-reviewed papers, soil sample analyses, and very, very detailed dictionaries. The clash begins as it must with language, the foundation of Zechariah. Sitchin's entire narrative rests on his unique translation of ancient Sumerian and Akkadian texts. The scholars argue that this foundation is made of sand. This is the core mainstream criticism. Sitchin's translations are not just unconventional, they are unsubstantiated and rejected by the global community of cuneiform experts. For instance, his poetic translation of Anunnaki as those who from heaven to earth came is dismissed. The scholarly consensus holds that the name simply means something akin to princely offspring or those of royal blood, designating their high status in the divine hierarchy. It's the difference between translating the word superstar as an otherworldly being of shining gas versus a very famous person. The skeptical argument continues. The Sumerian word Shem, which Sitchin famously translated as sky chamber or rocket ship, has a much more mundane meaning to linguists: name, reputation, or fame. The Anunnaki didn't ride in Shems, they were concerned with making a Shem for themselves. It's a fundamental difference that changes the entire context from science fiction to a very human story about ambition and legacy. The theorists are accused of seeing spaceships where the text is only talking about reputations. Next, the debate turns to the physical evidence. The scholars begin to patiently dismantle the key artifacts of the ancient astronaut theory, that quirky cylinder seal Virginia 243, which supposedly shows 12 planets, including Nibiru. A scholar points out that the seal's own ununiform inscription identifies it as belonging to Atta, the scribe. And the scene is a standard one, a presentation to a deity. The celestial symbols above are common ones representing the sun, the moon, and prominent stars. Not a scientifically accurate map of the solar system. The mysterious handbag carried by gods and sages in both Mesopotamia and Mesoamerica. The academics identify it as a bandu, a ritual bucket used by priests in purification ceremonies, likely holding holy water, a sacred object, yes, but not a piece of advanced technology. The ongoing debate highlights a fundamental clash in how we approach the past. It's a conflict of epistemology, the rigorous scientific method which demands that extraordinary claims be backed by extraordinary peer-reviewed and falsifiable evidence, versus a more esoteric approach that seeks grand patterns and hidden meanings across myths, continents, and millennia. The scholars see the theorists as engaging in a massive game of confirmation bias, cherry-picking data that fits their narrative while ignoring anything that contradicts it. It's the academic equivalent of someone trying to explain your own family photo album to you, but insisting your grandpa was an astronaut because he once wore a silver jacket. From the other side of the stage, the theorists fire back. They accuse the academics of being dogmatic, of having their own rigid orthodoxy that they refuse to challenge. They argue that mainstream science is too afraid to ask the big questions, too invested in the status quo, to see the revolutionary truth hiding in plain sight. They claim that the scholars have become the new high priests, guarding their version of history and branding any dissenters as heretics. It's less a debate and more a fundamental disagreement on the rules of the game, with one side shouting, "Show me the repeatable data," and the other shouting back, "Open your mind to the possibilities. You are caught in the crossfire of this intellectual battle." The comfortable certainty you felt just moments ago has evaporated, replaced by the messy, complex, and frustrating reality of historical inquiry. The story of the Anunnaki is not a solved case. It's a swirling, unresolved argument. On one side, you have a breathtaking story that seems to explain everything. On the other, you have a mountain of sober, methodical evidence that says the story, however compelling, is simply not true. You are left in the middle, adrift between myth and fact, wondering which is the more beautiful and which is the more true. You are caught in the dizzying crossfire of the great debate, with compelling theories on one side and a wall of skeptical facts on the other. The arguments feel circular, a stalemate that has lasted for decades. Your mind, seeking an escape from this intellectual deadlock, drifts away from the quiet tablet house and the stuffy lecture hall. It floats forward into the bright, noisy, glowing world of the 21st century. Here, in the realm of pop culture, the debate is over, the Anunnaki have won, they have been revived, and they are more famous now than they ever were in ancient Sumer. You find yourself scrolling through an endless digital stream of movies, games, and online forums. The Anunnaki and the concepts surrounding them are everywhere. You see their story reflected in big-budget blockbuster films about powerful godlike aliens who were sent to Earth eons ago to protect and secretly guide humanity's development. Their schisms and internal conflicts having massive repercussions for their human subjects. You see echoes in television shows about ancient gateways that lead to worlds ruled by powerful extraterrestrials who once posed as the gods of ancient civilizations, including those from Mesopotamia. The names might be changed to avoid copyright issues, but the blueprint is unmistakable. The Anunnaki narrative is a perfect engine for modern storytelling. Then you drift into the world of video games. Here, the gods and heroes of Mesopotamia have been living for decades, often completely separate from the alien theories. It's a fun historical fact that the great hero Gilgamesh, for example, has appeared as a recurring character in the popular Final Fantasy series since the early 92nd, usually as a powerful multi-armed warrior. But alongside these classic fantasy interpretations, a new genre has emerged. You see games where the central plot revolves around uncovering the secrets of a precursor race, an advanced civilization that vanished long ago, leaving behind powerful technology and clues that they were the gods who created humanity. The Anunnaki have become a ready-made, compelling backstory. But it's on the internet, in the chaotic wilderness of forums, blogs, and social media, that the Anunnaki have truly found their modern home. Here, you see the core theories mutate and evolve in fascinating ways. You encounter the quirky and now infamous conspiracy that the Anunnaki are in fact a race of reptilian shapeshifters who secretly control the world's governments. This idea, largely popularized by authors like David Icke, merged Sitchin's ancient astronaut narrative with other unrelated conspiracies to create a bizarre but incredibly durable modern myth. It's like a conspiracy theory potluck. Everyone brings their favorite dish, and by the end of the night, it's all been mixed into one strange, compelling stew. The Anunnaki have become a meme. You see images of Sumerian carvings with sarcastic captions. You see the recurring doomsday predictions every few years proclaiming that the planet Nibiru is finally on its inbound journey, its arrival imminent. These predictions come with blurry telescope photos and complex astronomical charts spread like wildfire and then quietly fizzle out only to be revived a few years later. The line between entertainment, satire, and sincere belief has become impossibly blurry. Media theorists continue to analyze how the internet and social media platforms have accelerated the spread of these narratives, making it difficult to distinguish between a true believer, someone trying to sell a book, and a kid just having fun creating a spooky meme. It's POS law in full effect on a global scale. The Anunnaki have completed their final transformation. They started as Mesopotamian gods. They were rebranded by the Babylonians and Assyrians. They were reimagined in the 20th century by Sitchin as alien miners. And now in the digital age, they have become open source mythology. They are icons of ancient mystery, a shorthand for any grand conspiracy, a piece of collaborative fiction written by millions of people online. They've gone from being etched in clay to being tagged on social media. They have achieved a new kind of immortality, not through their own divine nature, but through ours, through our unending fascination with deep mysteries and grand sweeping stories. The question of their reality seems almost beside the point. In our collective digital consciousness, they are very, very real. Your mind gently pulls back from the bright, chaotic glow of the digital world. The memes fade, the hot takes dissolve, and the noise of modern culture recedes until it's gone completely. You find yourself back where our journey began, standing in the immense silence of the Mesopotamian night. The air is cool and smells of dust and time. On the horizon, the dark shape of the ziggurat still reaches for a sky blanketed with impossibly brilliant stars. The entire sprawling, complicated story hangs here in the quiet air around you, and you are left to sift through it all one last time. So after this long journey, what is the uncovered truth? The first most solid truth is this: the Sumerians were titans. This is the bedrock fact that no theory can ever change. Long before Rome, before the pyramids of Giza took their final form, the people of this sun-baked land invented the world as we know it. They gave us writing, the wheel, the first law codes, the 60-second minute, the 60-minute hour, the epic poem, and the city itself. They were brilliant astronomers, skilled farmers, and master bureaucrats. Their accomplishments required no alien intervention to be breathtaking. To attribute all their genius to off-world assistance feels in some ways like a disservice to our own ancestors. They were brilliant and they were us. The second truth is that the grand unified theory of alien miners from Nibiru is almost certainly a modern fiction. It's a masterful piece of storytelling, a compelling epic that weaves every strange myth and anomaly into a single cohesive narrative. But with its foundations and disputed translations and its evidence dismissed by mainstream experts, it remains just that, a story, a fantastic what-if scenario. It's a testament to our own modern anxieties and hopes, our fear of environmental collapse, our dreams of cosmic contact, our desire for a simple explanation for our own often confusing existence. We've built a sprawling sci-fi cathedral on what might simply be a 4000-year-old typo. And yet, we are left with the third and perhaps most important truth. A mystery remains. Sweeping the alien theory aside does not answer the fundamental questions that gave rise to it. It does not explain why the Sumerian kings were listed with reigns lasting 28,800 years. It doesn't fully explain why the gods were so often described as physically descending from the heavens to dwell in temples. It doesn't make the handbag symbol appearing half a world away any less strange. The gaps in our knowledge are real, and in those gaps, in those shadows of history, anything can feel possible. Perhaps the most compelling idea that remains is the concept of a message in the myth. This is the final quirky possibility that lingers in the air. What if the stories are neither literal fact nor pure fiction? What if they are the distorted funhouse mirror reflection of a real profound event that early humanity experienced but lacked the vocabulary to describe? Maybe it wasn't aliens from another planet, but an encounter with a more advanced human culture. Their technology so far beyond the comprehension of Neolithic people that it could only be described as magic. Their leaders only as gods. Ultimately, the enduring mystery forces us to confront a fundamental question about the nature of myth itself. Are these stories psychological maps of the human mind? Or are they distorted historical records of events we can no longer comprehend? We are pattern-seeking creatures after all, hardwired to draw lines between the dots, even if the dots are separated by millennia. So after all this, the final uncovered truth is that the truth remains covered. The mystery of the Anunnaki endures not because of the evidence, but because of the lack of it. And its true power lies in its delicious, eternal refusal to be solved. The ancient ziggurat before you seems to soften at the edges, its sharp-stepped silhouette blurring into the deep indigo of the pre-dawn sky. The questions that have been racing through your mind begin to slow down now, their urgency fading, replaced by a deep and quiet sense of wonder. The need to know, to define, to solve the puzzle. All of that can be let go. The journey itself was the purpose. And now it is drawing to a gentle close. The air around you feels still and peaceful. The great debates of gods and scholars alike dissolving into the vast silence of history. The weight of these ancient mysteries is not yours to carry any longer. You can leave them here in the land between the rivers where they have rested for thousands of years. Let the dust of ages settle once more upon the clay tablets and let the secret sleep. Your awareness drifts away from the sun-baked earth of Sumer, floating gently back into the familiar comfort of your own room. You can feel the soft weight of your blanket and hear the gentle rhythmic hum of the fan that has been your companion on this long journey through time. The past recedes, becoming a soft and distant dream, and all that remains is the stillness of this moment. Here in the quiet dark, there are no more questions to answer, no more clues to decipher. There is only the gentle pull of sleep and the promise of rest. The mystery can wait. It will still be there tomorrow.